I pushed the front door open with my shoulder, careful not to drop the paper sack of leftover biscuits I had tucked under my arm. My shoes dangled from my fingers, soles still sticky from the fryer floor. The smell of hot grease clung to me, no matter how quickly I showered after a shift. Tonight was no different. It rolled into the house with me, thick and stubborn. Brenna looked up from her phone, nose wrinkling. "Mom, do you have to bring that smell inside?" she said, like I had a choice. Dane didn't look up. He was sprawled on my couch, legs stretched across the coffee table, game controller loose in his hand. On the screen, a race car sped into a wall and reset. "Shut the door," he muttered. I closed it quietly and stood for a moment in the entryway, the air heavy with the scent of microwave popcorn and their candle that claimed to smell like ocean breeze. I wondered if they thought the candle covered the reality, or if they simply believed their comfort mattered more than mine. The biscuit slipped in the bag, so I set it on the counter. No one asked about my night. No one noticed the way my feet swelled until I had to walk out of my shoes. Their laughter from earlier had faded into the hum of the television, Brenna tapping her screen while Dane kept clicking buttons. I glanced toward the hallway where the children slept. Their doors closed, their toys scattered across the carpet. This house had once been orderly, my house. I paid off every inch of it with burns on my arms and double shifts that blurred into years. Yet as I stood there, smelling of fryer oil, I felt less like the owner and more like a shadow they tolerated. I picked up the bag of biscuits again and slipped quietly into the kitchen, telling myself tomorrow I would find the words I had swallowed for too long. 8 years earlier, the call came late at night. Brenna's voice was tight, shaky, telling me she and Dane had lost their apartment. She was pregnant again, the second child on the way, and they had nowhere else to go. I didn't even hesitate. "Come here," I said. The words automatic, stitched into me from years of raising a daughter alone after Harold passed. Family sticks together. That's what I believed when they arrived. Brenna heavy in a yellow maternity dress and Dane carrying boxes marked important. I cleared space without complaint. At first, I set up the dining room with a fold-out cot for them, thinking it would be temporary, a couple of months until they got steady. But Brenna didn't like the lack of privacy, so I moved instead. I packed my things into bins, gave them my bedroom, and laid the cot down where the dining table used to stand. The house, every bill attached to it, was still mine. LG&E for the electric and gas, Louisville water, even the trash pickup, I paid them all. The mortgage had been gone for years, every penny chipped away by my night shifts, burned arms, missed birthdays, and holidays I worked while Brenna was still in school. Yet over time, they spoke of the house like it was theirs, rearranging furniture, painting walls, putting their name on the mailbox. I tried to hold on to small rituals. On Sundays, I polished the wood with lemon oil, the scent brightening the air. I listened to the radio at night, static and music keeping me company. One by one, those comforts vanished. The lemon smell was replaced by microwave dinners. My radio disappeared into the garage under boxes of their things. Privacy became a memory. I told myself it was fine. Just until they found their footing. Just until the baby came. Just until the next job stuck. But months blurred into years. And the cot dug deeper into my back with each one. When temporary lasts 8 years, what do you even call it? Help or erasure. The night it happened, I had worked a double 10 hours on my feet with no proper break. My uniform was freshly laundered that morning, but by the time I stepped through my own front door, it carried the same stubborn scent of grease that never left me. I clutched my purse, too tired to even slip off my shoes. The living room was crowded. Brenna had a couple of neighbors over, women from down the block, and Dane sat in the recliner, holding court with a beer. Laughter spilled through the house until Brenna turned toward me, her nose wrinkled and her lips curled into a smirk. "Which sewer did you crawl out of?" she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room went still. One of the neighbors gave a short, awkward laugh. But mostly there was silence. Dane stared at the television. The kids, perched on the rug, snickered nervously and glanced at their mother. No one spoke for me. No one said a word in my defense. I didn't answer. I felt my face flush, but I kept my chin level. I walked past them, down the hallway that used to echo with my own quiet, now cluttered with toys and laundry baskets. I shut the bathroom door and turned on the shower, letting the water beat against my skin until the sting in my chest dulled. When I stepped out, I didn't bother changing into night clothes. I pulled my small suitcase from the closet, laid it open on the cot, and began folding what little I still called mine. My quilt, Harold's Bible, the deed folder with every utility statement tucked inside. Each piece slid into the suitcase like punctuation at the end of a sentence I should have spoken long ago. I zipped it shut, lifted it, and walked quietly to the front door. No one noticed. The television laughed for them. The night air was cold, but it smelled of grass and not grease. I carried the suitcase 2 houses down and knocked on Mrs. Ellison's door. She opened it in her robe, took one look at me, and stepped aside without a word. That night, I lay on her couch, staring at the ceiling, knowing I could never return the same way again. Is leaving the same as surrender? Or the only way to walk back in as yourself the morning after Brenna's insult? I rode the number 4 bus downtown, suitcase at my feet, the city rolling by in gray streaks. I had called the office of a lawyer whose name I'd gotten from Mrs. Ellison. "Pauline Rakes," she said. Steady hands. Knows landlord law backwards. Pauline's office was small, lined with books that looked used, not staged. She greeted me without fuss, offered coffee, and listened as I laid out the story, the house in my name. 8 years of promises, no rent, no bills paid, no lease, nothing but my utilities and mortgage receipts. She nodded slowly, flipping through my folder. "In Kentucky, without a lease. They're at-will tenants," she said. "That means you can issue a 30-day notice to vacate. If they refuse, we go to court. With your documents, it's straightforward." Her words settled in me like bricks. Not dramatic, not vengeful, just structure. Paper as a backbone. I left her office lighter than I had entered. On the bus ride back, I opened my phone and logged into the LG&E account. Changed the password. Louisville Water next. Then the internet. Each reset was a lock clicking into place. By the time I reached the post office on Broadway, I filled out the form for a new P.O. box. My mail would come to me now, not sit in a kitchen basket Brenna rifled through. That evening, back on Mrs. Ellison's couch, I spread the folder across my lap. For the first time in years, I saw my name alone, unshared, unchallenged, printed on every bill, every deed, every page. It no longer felt like a burden. It felt like armor. When you take back the passwords, do you also take back the power? The next step was less about anger and more about procedure. With Pauline's guidance, I mailed the certified 30-day notice at the post office, watched the clerk stamp it, and kept the receipt tucked into my folder. That afternoon, Mrs. Ellison walked with me back to my house. I taped the notice to the front door, the paper sharp against the wood, and we both took a photo for record. By evening, the phone calls began. Brenna's voice shrilled through my voicemail. "How could you do this to us? We're family. You're throwing your own grandchildren out on the street." Dane's message followed, darker, threatening lawyers he didn't have and consequences he couldn't name. I let the recordings stack up untouched. The children didn't understand. Piper left me a drawing in crayon, slipped under Mrs. B. Ellison's door where I was staying. A picture of our house. Stick figures all smiling. She had written, "Don't be mad, Grandma." I folded it carefully and placed it in my Bible, right next to Harold's old notes. I signed a week-to-week lease on a tiny walk-up in Smoketown. The paint peeled in places, and the stairwell smelled of dust. But it was safe. And it was mine. The key felt strange in my hand, not heavy like the ones I had carried for decades, but sharp, temporary, a placeholder until the larger key returned. To cover the rent, I took extra shifts at KFC. The fryer burns were more frequent. The ache in my legs deeper. I fell asleep on a narrow mattress. Uniforms still hanging damp from the shower rod, but I didn't waver. Each day that passed, the clock ticked louder for them, not for me. If they never said thank you in 8 years, what will they say now that the clock is ticking by the end of the first week? Brenna's fury had gone public. She plastered Facebook with long posts about being abandoned by her own mother, weaving herself into a victim's tale for neighbors and cousins who hadn't set foot in my house in years. I didn't answer. Let her words float in the blue glow of a screen. The truth lived on paper, not in posts. Meanwhile, the house began to sag under their neglect. Mrs. Ellison walked by and told me the trash cans overflowed for days. Lids cracked open, bags spilling into the yard. When I went back with her as my witness, I saw it myself. The sink was stacked with dishes, the counters sticky, and the smell of spoiled milk cut through the rooms. Toys and shoes littered the hallway. The same hallway where I used to scrub the baseboards every spring until they shone. I didn't argue or scold. I went straight to the kitchen and taped a sheet of paper to the fridge. The list ran 2 pages. Line by line, LG&E electric and gas totals. Louisville water bills, grocery tallies, school fees for Piper's field trips. Dane's car insurance I had covered more than once. At the bottom, I wrote one sentence in block letters. None of this was free. All of it cost me. Piper wandered in while I was smoothing the tape. Her hands were sticky with juice, and her eyes searched my face. "Grandma," she asked softly, "are you mad forever?" I knelt so we were eye to eye. "No, baby, I'm not mad. I'm just tired." She nodded, as if the difference made sense to her, then slipped back toward her room. I left the list hanging there, a record no one could deny. What weighs more feelings without receipts, or receipts without thanks? The courthouse on 6th and Jefferson smelled faintly of old coffee and floor polish, its high ceilings echoing every shuffle of shoes. I sat with Pauline outside the courtroom, my folder clutched to my chest. Each receipt and deed in order, my palms sweated, though the morning air had been cold when I left Smoketown. When the bailiff finally called our case, we walked in together. The judge, a woman with steel gray hair pulled into a bun, surveyed the room with steady eyes. Brenna and Dane slid into their seats on the opposite side, Brenna whispering sharply until the judge raised a hand for silence. "Mrs. Maddox," the judge began, "you are petitioning to regain possession of a property in your sole name. Do they have a lease agreement? I kept my voice even." "No, Your Honor." "Have they contributed financially? Utilities? Rent? Maintenance?" I opened the folder, handed forward my papers. "No, ma'am. Every account is in my name. I have the records here." The judge glanced at the pages, then at Brenna. "Do you contest this?" Brenna's chin lifted. "We're family. My mother shouldn't need a lease. We've lived there for years. That should count for something." The judge's tone stayed calm but firm. "Family status does not erase property law. Without a lease and without financial contribution, you are guests who have overstayed the owner's permission." Dane muttered under his breath, but the judge ignored him. She turned back to me. "Mrs. Maddox, Is it your desire to have them vacate the premises? Yes, Your Honor. The judge nodded once. Judgment granted. 10 business days to vacate. If not, sheriff-assisted removal will follow. Her gavel struck the desk, sharp as a door latch snapping shut. For a moment, I couldn't move. The air felt clearer, as if a weight had shifted off my chest. Pauline touched my elbow, guiding me toward the aisle. Brenna stared at the floor, mouth tight, while Dane shook his head like the ruling was an inconvenience rather than an ending. Outside, the cold wind cut across Jefferson Street, but I drew in a long breath that filled me from the inside out. If a judge gives you your keys back on paper, how do you carry them home in practice? The moving truck showed up just after 8 in the morning, its gears grinding as it backed into the driveway I had paid off long before Brenna was born. I watched from the sidewalk with Pauline's checklist folded in my pocket, ready to call the sheriff if they missed the deadline. Brenna stormed in and out of the house, barking orders while scrolling her phone. Dane carried one box at a time, slow as if dragging the process out might change the verdict. Their voices rose and fell in sharp bursts, but none of it was aimed at me. I stood still, the winter air biting my cheeks, waiting. The kids moved differently. Leo tugged a blanket across the yard, tripping on its corner, while Piper carried a shoebox full of her drawings. She avoided my eyes until, halfway to the truck, she dropped the box and sprinted back. She wrapped her arms around my waist and buried her face in my coat. "Grandma, do we have to go?" she whispered. I bent down, holding her tight. The smell of crayons and sugar on her hair. "You have to go with your mom right now," I said softly. "But listen, the porch light here will always be on when respect is part of the visit. Do you understand?" She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I kissed her hair, let her go, and watched her run back toward the truck. Brenna didn't look at me. Dane slammed the door harder than he needed to, muttering something I didn't care to hear. By late morning, the truck pulled away. Their car followed, tail lights shrinking down the block. The house stood quiet behind me. I stepped across the threshold, my hand brushing the frame like it was an old friend. Dust lingered on the windowsills, a faint smell of spoiled milk in the kitchen, but the silence was steady, clean. I walked through each room slowly, the absence of clutter almost startling. The locksmith came by that afternoon. When the new keys turned smooth in the lock, I felt the click travel all the way up my arm. When silence fills a house, is it emptiness, or finally the sound of your name? Once the locks were changed, I began piecing the house back together in the only way I knew how, slowly, one ritual at a time. On Sunday morning, I opened the windows, let the cold air sweep through, and polished the furniture with lemon oil until the scent carried through every room. It smelled the way it used to when Harold was alive, when Brenna was still small, when the house was truly mine. That night, I unfolded my quilt, the one patched and mended over the years, and spread it across my bed. The familiar weight pressed down on me, not like a burden, but like a reminder that this space was mine again. I brewed tea in the kitchen, steam curling above my favorite mug, and sat at the table in silence that didn't ache. For the first time in years, the quiet felt like light. With Pauline's guidance, I finished reclaiming the accounts. Dane's meal kit subscription, gone. Brenna's endless streaming services, canceled. Every charge that had slipped through my card was erased. When I looked at the online statement, it was the first time in nearly a decade I saw only my own purchases, groceries for one, utilities at normal levels, not drained by everyone else. A few days later, a letter came addressed in neat handwriting. It was from my niece, Maribel Ortega, who was finishing her nursing program at the University of Louisville. She wrote that she needed a quiet place to stay while studying for her exams and offered to pay rent, help with groceries, and do chores if I would consider renting her the spare room. I read the letter twice, then a third time. It didn't sound like someone angling for comfort at my expense. It sounded like respect. I folded it carefully and set it on the kitchen counter, thinking not of filling space, but of what it meant to share a house with dignity. If you can choose who enters, who deserves the first new key, Maribel arrived with 2 suitcases and a crate of textbooks. She stepped into the house carefully, pausing at the threshold as though waiting for permission. I had already cleared the spare room, opened the windows, and set fresh sheets on the bed. On the kitchen table sat a short, written agreement rent due on the 1st. Shared chores. No overnight guests without asking. It wasn't cold. It was clarity. She read it, nodded, and signed without hesitation. From the first week, the house shifted. Maribel moved with quiet respect, never assuming, never taking. She cooked twice a week, simple meals between study sessions, when she left notes on the fridge. They were reminders that she'd already handled the trash or that she'd picked up groceries on her way back from class. The house didn't feel crowded. It felt balanced. One evening, as I polished the wood with lemon oil, she leaned against the doorway, smiling. "It smells like home in here," she said. I didn't answer, but I felt the words sink deep. Sweeter than any apology I'd waited years to hear. Brenna only reached out once. A text lit my phone late at night. "Mom, we just need temporary help, maybe a couple hundred for groceries until Dane's hours pick up." I read it twice, then typed back a list of resources job placement offices on Barrett Avenue, utility aid numbers, food banks. I signed it with "Take care." No money, no opening. Just a line drawn where one had never been before. Weeks passed. My shifts at KFC were no easier. But coming home was different. I slipped off my shoes on the mat by the door. A habit I had started for myself, alone. Inside, the living room glowed lemon bright, uncluttered, quiet. Maribel's laughter sometimes drifted from the back room, soft, never invasive. On evenings when the weather was kind, I sat on the porch beneath the maple Harold had planted after Brenna was born. Its branches arched above me, steady and sure. I held my keys in my hand, felt their weight, and knew they matched my name again. When you finally hold your keys and your name together, what doors will you open, and which will you keep closed?